Now, ladies and gentlemen, may I tempt you to the first Fireside Chat today? This is a sneak peek into the future of digital platforms in the context of European regulations, whether they are going to be welcomed or likely to be contested. Some time ago, answers seemed quite obvious. But today, after many things that are happening all around us, like Sunday protests against lockdown measures in London, we are no longer sure what really is good for us, what can happen around us, whether in cyberspace or outside. Now, I promise you a much more peaceful time now by our fireside. And we'll have Michał Rakowski, Director of Strategic Partnership and Projects at Cybersec and the Kościuszko Institute, who will chat to Ora Sala, Public Policy Director and Head of the EU Affairs at Facebook, about the future of digital platforms and European regulations, welcomed or contested.
Welcome, Aura Sala, to Cybersec.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Aura, you have recently joined Facebook as head of EU affairs in Brussels. Not the easiest job, I can imagine. Looking back at your time in the Finnish military, in Finnish politics, as an advisor in the European Commission, what convinced you to join Facebook? And what ambitions do you have for Facebook EU government affairs?
So first of all, let me start saying that throughout my career, I have strived to build a better functioning European Union for all. And a European Union that is open, accessible, transparent, and accountable, and which contributes to more connected Europe and global community. And that is something that Facebook is also doing, and that convinced me to join the company this May. And my role at Facebook gives me the perfect opportunity to advance this mission and to work on some of the most pressing social, ethical, and political questions raised by tech revolution. There is so much potential in new tech. It gives people a voice, creates economic opportunities to all, and build bridges throughout the societies. So I'm working on this with my highly competent team in Brussels, and I must say that I have really enjoyed my first 4 months.
Exactly, 4 months into your new role, and Facebook has already come under intensive pressure resulting from the ruling by the European Court of Justice on international data flows. For transfers to the US, the ECJ has invalidated Privacy Shield, and alternatives such as the EU contractual clauses are still being put into question. So how is Facebook dealing with this legal limbo, and what does it mean for other companies as well?
Thank you for this very important question, which should be top of mind for every government, company, and economist in Europe and actually around the world. First of all, let me emphasize that this issue is much bigger than Facebook. But let me also be absolutely crystal clear. We have absolutely no desire and no wish to leave the European Union, as you may have seen some headlines on that. Why would we? We are delighted that so many people take a joy and find our platforms useful. And crucially, we are very proud of the fact that we have 25 million companies using our platforms in Europe. However, we would clearly not be able to operate as we do, and nor will many other companies across Europe if from one moment to the next existing legal provisions which govern data transfers from the European Union to US and elsewhere to other third countries will be suddenly removed, this ability. So it's not only about data transfers, actually. It's about access to data. And that's why it's so crucial that we will find a solution in a short term and in a long term as soon as possible.
The EU is also stepping up its efforts to regulate digital platforms. One of the EU's most ambitious policy files in that respect is the DSA, the Digital Services Act. which is likely to have a special focus on US technology providers such as Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, and Facebook. Can you tell us, how do you see the EU's approach to digital platforms and how Facebook positions itself on the DSA?
Thank you. This is a very important question. The Digital Service Act is really an opportunity to create a better business environment that will help the EU compete better on the innovation entrepreneurial front. There is no longer of separate digital economy and traditional economy in Europe. Digital tools are at the heart of how every sector and every organization operates, basically. It's also an opportunity to raise accountability of online platforms while incentivizing them to undertake voluntary proactive measures. The internet landscape has changed significantly since the adoption of the e-commerce directive. This major landmark established the so-called limited liability regime, under which many innovative services have flourished in Europe and elsewhere over the past 20 years. Of course, there is always room to adopt and modernize laws that were enacted 2 decades ago, for sure. But the principle of minutes liability for intermediaries remains valid, and we would strongly support that it is endorsed in the DSA. We have now an opportunity to harmonize the approach to connect regulation across Europe and create the comprehensive legislation that will set a global standards, not dissimilar to what, for example, GDPR did for data protection across the globe. In a nutshell, I expect, and my team expects the DSA to lead to a framework that addresses fragmentation, promotes the single market in the European Union, and addresses its gaps in the best way to ensure Europe's leadership in digital transformation.
Mm-hmm. Aura, most people will have heard criticism that Facebook should actually do more when it comes to fighting harmful content on its platforms. Where would you locate the cause for that criticism? And in your assessment, how is Facebook doing right now? And will the DSA do enough to put a halt to harmful content?
This is a very good question. We will support EU-level policy measures that require online intermediaries to have systems in place to address content that is unlawful, as well as content that is lawful but nonetheless harmful as such. However, it is important to acknowledge the differences between illegal versus lawful but harmful content. I know that there are many definitions that we need to clarify. We should clearly distinguish between illegal versus lawful but potentially harmful content. Harmful content is contextual, difficult to define, may be culturally subjective, and is often legally ambiguous. Harmful content should therefore not form part of the liability regime. At the same time, it is important for society that platforms can action against lawful but potentially harmful content according to very clear policies. Accountability. Having certain systems and procedures in place to address harmful content rather than holding them liable for specific content. This is the best way to ensure an appropriate balancing of safety, freedom of expression, and other fundamental freedoms.
Thank you for this answer. Aura, another issue that the EU is focusing on is election integrity. The European Democratic Action Plan is the EU's effort to codify rules for how platforms need to deal with election interference. What are the main pillars Facebook would like to see in the EDAP proposal?
First of all, let me say that Facebook welcomes this proposal, whatever it will be then in the end, and cooperation between governments, industry, media, civil society, and, for example, academia is very essential here. Facebook has steadily increased our investments in tools, technology, and infrastructure to enforce our policies and promote authentic communications via our services. In the debate about disinformation, there is much confusion between concepts such as disinformation, misinformation, foreign interference, influence, information operations, and even election integrity. As policymakers decide on the appropriate measures to tackle disinformation particularly, it is important that the definitions used are clear and precise, and to ensure rules and regulations as well as enforcement measures to hold relevant actors accountable. I'm speaking here such as transparency reporting measures, and they should be fit for purpose. Focus on any potential regulation from our point of view are that rules to address political advertising should be very clear. And that includes greater transparency for contributions and expenditures and clarity of definition. What is a political ad? I faced this myself last year when I was running in the European Parliament elections. A common EU regulatory framework for elections, and in particular cross-border political advertising and campaign financing. That's very crucial for this. And our approach to misinformation is guided by the principle that we should provide people with accurate and informative content while balancing freedom of expression. Our users want to see high quality content on our platforms, and so do we. And we also call for greater efforts to boost digital literacy, digital citizenship. And I was really pleased to hear that Commission President Ursula von der Leyen also emphasized this on her State of the Union speech last week. These efforts should be beyond only talking about digital and media literacy. Rather, we support the holistic approach that equips people with the skills they need, from critical thinking to media literacy, to participating safely, respectfully, and responsibility in digital society. But last but not least, we agree with the focus on Democracy Action Plan that it's expected to put on boosting journalism and helping news organizations adapt to this change in digital world. And we are very committed supporting journalism, which is a key pillar of democratic societies.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, talking today, we are just 1 month away from the US elections. So in that context, could you tell us what Facebook is doing to protect the electoral process in the United States?
Absolutely. We are a fundamentally different company than we were 2016. We have more than 35,000 people now working on safety and security issues. We've been involved in more than 200 elections around the world since 2017. And we have built new products and developed stronger policies to help us prepare for US 2020. And it will be a crucial moment. Our strategy to protect elections not only applies during critical times like election periods, but year-round, and is centered around 3 main areas. First of all, preventing interference. Second of all, removing harmful content and reducing misinformation. And now I'm addressing here particularly misinformation, and increasing transparency. And if I may, specifically on interference, a key part of our strategy to prevent interference is working with government authorities, law enforcement, security experts, civil society, and of course with other tech companies to stop emerging threats by establishing a direct line of communication, sharing knowledge, and identifying opportunities for collaboration. We are able to anticipate threats and prevent election interference much better than before. Throughout improved technology, we are much more effective at finding and removing people abusing our platforms.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for this answer. Ora, I have one last question. So we talked about the DSA and the European Democratic Action Plan as key pillars to regulate platforms in Europe. Do you think that this passing legislation will help to rebuild people's trust in digital platforms in the context of democratic processes? And could you underline for us the main significance of this legislation for Facebook?
Absolutely. One of the underlying objectives of the EU with this proposal is to raise the level of trust towards online platforms like Facebook. I think the benefits brought in the variety of services and products that these companies have brought are undeniable. But equally, there has been an erosion of trust. This is why it is important for Europe to come up with clear rules that have the users and the citizens at the center and provides a clear framework that makes platforms like ourselves accountable. And these rules and proposals will also be adopted through a democratic process. And I'm emphasizing here that we need our democratic decision makers to make these decisions. Facebook is happy to contribute to this important exercise and engage in debates like we are having here today.
Okay, thank you, Ora Sala, for all the answers. It was a real pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ora. Thank you very much, Michał.